day everyone, I am Robihani Caballas and we are now in the lesson 5 in which we will be tackling other Asian countries literature. So me and my co-reporter Reina Rosas will share to you Vietnam's short stories in rich meaning. So the first story that I am going to share to you is the story entitled Little Statesman Lee. So I will read the story and you listen carefully. Little Statesman Lee. There was once a famous Vietnamese statesman whose name was Lee. He was very short of stature. In fact, he was so short that the top of his head was no higher than a man's waist. Statesman Lee was sent to China to settle a very important political problem with that nation. When the Emperor of China looked down from his dragon throne and saw his little man, he exclaimed, "Are the Vietnamese such little people?" Lee answered, "Sir, in Vietnam we have both little men and big men. Our ambassadors are chosen in accordance with the importance of the problem. As this is a small matter, they have sent me to negotiate. When there is a big problem between us, we will send a big man to speak with you." The Emperor of China pondered. If the Vietnamese consider this important problem only a small matter, they must indeed be a great and powerful people. So he listened his demands, and the matter was settled then and there. So the story Little Statesman Lee conveys the message that the size of an individual does not necessarily determine their capability or the importance of the issue they represent. It emphasizes the idea that diplomacy and problem solving should be based on merit of the matter at hand rather than superficial factors. And it also highlights the diplomatic skill of statesman Lee in diffusing potential conflict through clever negotiation. Now, the moral lesson of the story Little Statesman Lee is that one's physical appearance should not be a measure of their capabilities or the importance of the task they are entrusted with. Instead, it underscores the value of choosing the right person for the right situation based on their skills, knowledge, and experience. Now let's move on to the next story entitled The Tailor and the Mandarin. So again, I will read the story and you listen carefully. The Tailor and the Mandarin. In the capital of Vietnam, there was once a certain tailor who was renowned for his skill. Every garment that left his shop had to fit the client perfectly, regardless of the latter's weight, build, age, or bearing. One day, a high mandarin sent for the tailor and ordered a ceremonial robe. After taking the necessary measurements, the tailor respectfully asked the mandarin how long he had been in the service. "What does that have to do with the cut of my robe?" asked the mandarin good-naturedly. "It is of great importance, sir," responded the tailor. "You know that a newly appointed mandarin impressed with his own importance carries his head high and his chest out. We must take this into consideration and cut the rear lappet shorter than the front. Later, little by little, we lengthen the rear lappet and shorten the front one. The lappets are cut exactly the same length when the mandarin reaches the halfway point of his career. Finally, when bent over with the fatigue of long years of service and the burden of age, he aspires only to join his ancestors in heaven. The robe must be made longer in the back than in the front. Thus, you see, sir, that a tailor who does not know the seniority of the mandarins cannot fit them correctly." Now, the story The Tailor and the Mandarin conveys the message that in dealing with people, it is important to understand and respect their status, experience, and needs. So, the moral lesson of the story The Tailor and the Mandarin can be interpreted in several ways, but one common moral lesson is the importance of understanding and respecting the individual experiences and changes that people go through in their lives. And the tailor of the story illustrates the importance of recognizing that people's needs and preferences can change over time, and tailoring a robe that fits not only their physical measurements but also their changing posture and self-perception. And it teaches us that it's not enough to judge people solely by their current status or appearance, and that we should consider their past experiences and potential future changes. In a broader sense, it encourages us to be more empathetic and understanding in our interaction with others, taking into account the stage of life and the various challenges and transformations that people go through. That's all for my report. I hope you understand something, and thank you for listening.
So good day everyone, my name is Reina Rosas and this is the third story of short stories in Vietnam with rich meaning. The Blind Son-in-Law. There was a handsome young man who had been blind from birth, but because his eyes looked quite normal, very few people were aware of his affliction. So one day, he went to the home of a young lady to ask her parents for her hand in marriage. The men of the household were about to go out to work in the rice fields, and in order to demonstrate his industry, he decided to join them. He trailed along behind the others and was able to do his share of the day's work. When it came time to finish for day, all the men hurried homeward for the evening meal. But the blind man lost contact with the others and fell into a well. So when the guest did not appear, the future mother-in-law said, "Oh, that fellow will be a fine son-in-law, for he puts in a full day's labor. But it is really time for him to stop for today's boys and run out to the field and tell him to return for supper." The men grumbled at this task but set out and looked for him. As they passed the well, the blind man overheard their conversation and was able to clamber out and follow them back to the house. So, at the meal, the blind man was seated next to his future mother-in-law, who loaded his plate with food. But then disaster struck. A bold dog approached and began to eat the food from his plate. "Why don't you eat that dog a good slap?" asked his future mother-in-law. "So why do you let him eat your food?" "Madam," replied the blind man, "I have too much respect for the master and the mistress of this house to dare strike their dog." "So no matter," replied the worthy lady. "Here is a mallet. If that dog dares you bother you again, give him a good blow on the head." So now the mother-in-law saw that the young man was so modest and shy that he seemed afraid to eat, and now would take nothing from his plate. She wanted to encourage him and selected some sweetmeats from a large platter and placed them before him. So on hearing the clatter of the chopsticks against his plate, the blind man thought that the dog had returned to annoy him. So he took off the mallet and gave the poor woman such as a first blow on the head that she felt unconscious. So needless to say, that was the end of the courtship. So this story is a commentary on the importance of hard work and the ability to overcome adversity. So it means na ang kalagahan ng sipag at kakayanang makayanan ang paghihirap. So, the second story with rich meaning is the cook's big fish. One day, his cook was enticed into a game of chance and lost the money that had been entrusted to him for today's purchase at the market. So fearful of being punished, should be he returned home with empty hands. He invented the following story. "This morning, on arriving at the market, I noticed a large fish for sale. So it was fat and fresh. In short, a suffered fish. For the sake of curiosity, I asked the price. It was only 1 bill, although the fish was easily worth 2 or 3. It was a real bargain, and thinking only of the fine dish that it would make for you, I did not hesitate to spend the money for today's provision. So, halfway home, the fish which I was carrying on a line through the gills began to stiffen as in death. I recalled the old adage, "A fish out of water is a dead fish," and as I happened to be passing a pond, I made haste to plunk it into the water, hoping to revive it under the influence of its natural element. So, a moment later, seeing it was still lifeless, I took it off the line and held in my two hands. Soon, it strayed a little yawn, and then with a quick movement slipped from my grasp. I plunged my arm into the water to seize it again, but with a flick of the tail, it was gone. So I confess that I have been very stupid. So when the cook had finished his tale, Toussaint clapped his hands and said, "That's perfect, that's perfect." It was thinking of the fishbowl escape. But the cook failed to understand this point and left, lapping up his sleeve. Then he went about telling his friends with a triumphant air, who says, "My master is so wise. I lost all the market money at cards. Then I invented a story, and he swallowed it whole. Who says my master is so wise?" So, Mencius the philosopher once said, "A plausible lie can deceive even a superior intellect." So, it means nga, ang kapanipaniwala ng kasinungalingan ay maaring linlangin kahit na isang nakahigit na talino. So, that's the meaning of these short stories in Vietnam, and that's all, and thank you.